Wednesday, November 19th. Can I have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Mumm?
Here.
Commissioner Roth?
Here.
Commissioner Polly?
Here.
Mayor Neely?
Here. Thank you. And anyway, we're going to discuss the 2015 City Commission meeting calendar. Meetings I won't be making, but that's fine.
Yeah. I'm confused about that.
That's correct. It's about that time of year, and even though we won't have this full commission here in the new year, we do need to do our planning ahead. And so you have the calendar before you. It's according to all holidays are worked in, all Metro Enhancement, OCCIT, budget meetings, any meeting of a formal nature where you need to be present. So if you have any changes, I'd be happy to if you could bring those up at this time, and then we'll go from there. But there's no change as far as the schedule. It's still the first and the third Wednesday of each month, with the work session in between those two meetings on the Tuesday in between. That's generally the second Tuesday of each month. Sometimes, because of 5-week months, it ends up being the first.
And I was going to say, I assume that the whole of the commission will be able to do the Wednesday meetings. We've never had an issue like that, but it's potential you could have one.
We potentially could, and if that occurred, then we would deal with that issue at that time. But no one has brought anything to my attention regarding that. Any
well, thank you for
changes,
putting
or?
me on the speakers too when I started talking, but out of order. Betty?
I'm okay with this. Is this that we're approving tonight? I mean,
No, just if there's any conflicts, we do this every year.
Right.
Just
Not that I can.
if there's any conflicts, then where several of you cannot be present at one meeting, we would make some adjustments and so forth. Otherwise, we're finalizing it for next year so that we can do the planning and get meetings on the calendar so there aren't conflicts and so forth.
I don't see any conflicts, but I do see something that's not included.
What's that?
I had talked about wanting to have a retreat for urban renewal as well.
Okay,
Planning session.
Okay, the urban renewal, it wouldn't necessarily, well, the urban renewal budget committees are on here. We haven't discussed that yet, but we
Okay.
will sure bring that up with Eric. And
Okay. And that's all
One thing I
planned.
might also mention, we typically have done those urban renewal planning sessions during your regular urban renewal meetings schedule, so there might not actually be any changes. We can work that into the schedule.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, any other changes? If not, we'll just move forward
Looks good.
with it as it's presented.
well, as far as I know, I don't have any conflicts, but thanks for asking. I don't know about anybody else.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Okay, then that will go on to our consideration of a designated dog off-leash areas within parks. And Scott Archer will lead the way.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor Neely. As I believe the Commission is aware, the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee and staff have been working for some time on developing a dog park in Oregon City, and that's still very much a goal of both our Parks Committee and of staff to identify and develop a permanent dog park facility. And this continues to be a process. In fact, just on that note, real quickly, we are, as you know, we're doing the Glen Oak Park Master Plan, the property out by the high school, and one of the amenities that's developed through that public process has been, at least as of now, we've tentatively identified a part of that park as having a dog, a fenced dog park area. Not the whole park, but just part of it. So at any rate, that's something that we continue to work towards. I know that several of the commissioners have expressed interest in that as well. And so as we've continued to explore this idea, PRAC has been studying this for quite some time and have developed and recommended to you, and this is what we're presenting tonight, and it's been a bit of time coming forward, but they've developed what we're calling an interim solution to provide for the the folks in our community that want to have off-leash areas within parks for their dogs. And we get a lot of feedback. My department receives a lot of feedback from folks that want that type of amenity and that service. Excuse me. So as you may be aware, right now we have a blanket park rule that says dogs must be leashed in all of our parks. And granted, that's not a rule that's always followed, as you probably see if you're out in the community, but it is a rule. So after reviewing and studying this issue for quite some time, the Parks and Rec Committee has developed a recommendation, and that's what I'm presenting to you tonight, and that is that we would designate some off-leash areas within existing parks, and we're talking about three sites, and the idea is that this would be a 1-year trial, that we would see how this goes, and then we would examine that and report back and decide if this is something that we wanted to continue, and also see where the development of a permanent facility is at, and that kind of thing. And the idea was to develop some sites within existing parks that would be not fenced in, but just basically designated areas that would be identified and signed, and that's allows folks to run their dogs within those areas with some understanding of some basic rules.
But
And
it's not fenced in.
That is correct. That is correct. So we wouldn't be making any improvements other than basically just some signage, education, and putting in the dog waste disposal dispensers. And those three parks are Park Place, Barkley Park, not Barkley Hills by the cemetery, but Barkley Park on 12th, just down from the pool, and Wesley Lynn Park. And I've given you, and also for anybody in our audience, there are some handouts that I've provided just to give you a general idea of those areas that PRAC has identified. And each of those three parks, on the pictures, there's a shaded area that kind of shows you generally where that designated area would be. And as I said, PRAC spent a lot of time studying this, and staff has spent a lot of time studying this. In fact, the Parks Committee did research to the extent of taking a tour this summer of parks and actually walking these sites and looking at the pros and cons and really thinking about it. And the idea, too, is with these three parks would be geographically spread across the community so that you have the opportunity to if you wish to do this type of activity, to do so within sort of close proximity to where you might be in Oregon City. So kind of the the north, middle, and south parts of town is the idea there. So that's the idea with the three parks. And we also thought that these three sites would be conducive to this type of use because of potentially a lower used either park or an area within a park, and so it makes for lack of, or it lessens the ability or the opportunity for conflicts to happen and that kind of thing. And this is something we also studied other communities, other agencies that do this, and found out some, the good and the bad and the ugly and how you do that. And what I've also given you is, on the last page of this, is just a sample of the type of signage or the rules that you might see in these types of areas. So, for example, we would ask folks to follow all the rules that would be placed, and that they would still have to have a leash available should their dog need to be leashed. Responsible for all of the conduct of their pet. So should their dog become out of control or something like that, they would be responsible to take care of that. Removing the dog waste, we already require that anyway. Dogs are allowed in parks, they're just required to be on leash. So we already have, that's an issue we already deal with in terms of managing the cleanup of waste, and we provide those dog dispensers at a lot of our facilities. We would require pets to be licensed and vaccinated, and under control, under voice control, and then we would, of course, ask people to be just considerate generally of other users of those sites. This is just a sample. It's not the absolute, there probably are some other things that we would add to that. And the intent tonight is not necessarily to get into all the details of this, but just to present you the the general idea, and to get a sense of your level of comfort with this and whether or not you want us to go ahead and proceed with the program. A park rule does not necessarily require a commission change to an ordinance or something like that. We actually have a provision in our city code that allows for the city manager to create or change a park rule. But obviously, we still wanted to bring this back to the commission because we know you're very interested in this, and so we just wanted your feedback and to see whether you'd like us to go ahead and proceed. I would like to also acknowledge that we've got a couple of our PrAC members here this evening. We have our chair, Bob Burns, and another member, Roger Fowler-Theus, is here. If you'd be inclined, I think our PrAC chair has a few comments that he might want to make in terms of the process.
Absolutely. I think either one would work.
Thank you very much. My name is Bob Burns, current chair of the PrAC committee. And just a few comments. Some will be redundant. However, since I've made some notes, I'll go ahead and present them. PrAC supports allowing off-leash dog areas in selected city parks. We have discussed this topic in several of our meetings over the past year and a half. We've had lots of citizen input, and as Scott mentioned, most recently in the Glen Oak Park design meetings, we've had a lot of interest there for adding a dog park in that prospective park. As a matter of fact, when we presented our goals to the Commission last year, goal number 4 states that on a trial basis, PrAC supports allowing off-leash dog areas in selected city parks. An evaluation process should accompany this trial. We recommend 3 parks on a trial basis, as Scott mentioned, Westerland, Park Place, and Barclay. And the reasons of 3 rather than 1 for better access for the north, south, and center areas of the city, and not to overrun just 1 park. So we thought to have multiple parks would be better for a trial basis. And we are willing to assist in an evaluation process if that is desirable. And I'd be glad to respond to any questions that the Commission may have.
Kathy Roth.
Well, I was one of the ones that was really excited about getting a dog park in Oregon City. I do have a little bit of concern about being off-leash parks, or off-leash for dogs in just a public park, especially given that we don't have a dog officer or a code enforcement person to even back up some of these rules that are on record. To me, it would just seem better to wait until we can do something that's fenced, that would keep dangerous dogs or whatever, because I've run into that in different parts of the city. And I don't know, it just seems like we don't have enough behind us yet right now to enforce this, to enforce the privilege.
Well, I guess my comment would be that's why we want a trial basis. And actually, right now, there are a lot of off-leash dogs currently running around out there. At least this would give us some rules, published rules, and a trial basis to go on. Mm-hmm. I think down the road, it would certainly be better for a fenced area, and hopefully that can happen in this new park that we're getting designed right now. But
did you check with Mary S. Young on any problems that they have over there?
I think
we did.
Scott has.
We did. That was one of the. That was actually one of the areas that we used as a kind of a reference to see how things were going, because that is pretty much what they do. Is they have a designated area within the park that's not fenced. It's a little bit isolated because of some. There's.
But we've run into some
and
aggressive
so-
dogs there, is what I'm wondering
Sure.
about.
Sure. There's
When I've been in the off-leash, when I'm off-leash.
yeah. We have, yeah, like I said, there's different experiences. We've talked to other agencies, and there's a lot of information out there right now. Dog parks is a very big topic in Parks and Recreation. So a lot of my professional publications and the peer groups that I meet with and so forth, this is something that we talk about, and there's good and bad, and you've got most folks that are responsible, and you've got a few that aren't. Just like with any activity, quite frankly, that we have, kids on the playgrounds. You got some mostly good kids, and there's a few not so good ones that are going to cause problems. And so it's just one of those things that we have to kind of understand, and if it's something that we want to do, just realize that we're probably going to have a few of those types of things, and we would do the best that we can. And granted, you're right. I agree with what you're talking about in terms of the enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
That is an issue. I think Bob made a good point that we have right now. We really have a situation where a lot of our parks are off-leash parks because we'll try to enforce, but we just don't have the ability. And I think what this would do is we can encourage those folks to come to designated areas where the folks that are in that park understand that there might be some dogs running around, and that doesn't give owners permission or free rein to let their dogs be aggressive or out of control. We try to deal with that, but at least maybe try to contain that and bring folks to instead of being all over the place at all of our parks, try to get them to come to one of the three sites. And again,
it's a good idea.
Yeah,
but I'm just,
I understand the concerns.
I don't want to put any more burden on Jim getting phone calls or.
I understand. Yeah.
Thank you.
I've got next on the list. In my experience at Barkley Park, I lived across it for 25 years. The number one use is an off-leash dog park. I mean, that's the fact of the way it is. I've seen groups doing aerobics there as groups. Sometimes the children come from the Barkley preschool program, but they're always supervised. And the park is kept clean. Those people that utilize it clean up after their dogs. I've never seen any bad issues. My preference actually, when I saw the fencing requirement and some of the early reports, I was concerned that number one, it'd be more expensive, and number two, it might lead to the concentration of only a park like you're talking about. I basically support the program there at Barkley Park simply because that's the main use of it. And I've never seen any problems there.
One more thing we could do is work through the neighborhood associations and try to be on their agendas, a few times a year to ask for support and to help watch out for it too.
Have Betty Mum?
We first, I want to thank you guys, Olive Crack, for taking this on. I know it was a big job for you guys to do. There are a lot of pros and cons. Actually, who's going to clean up? Who's going to enforce? These are all very good questions that we have to deal with. Our house is right across from Stafford Park. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. But we do have a lot of dogs that roam around up there, and not all owners clean up after their dogs. When they think they're in a park, they think they don't need to. So, I mean, that's kind of the nature of the beast. With people. With people. Some people just think, well, if it's in a park, then it's fine, and, whatever. But I know at one point there was, through the Neighborhood Association or Facebook, and Mr. Gifford could probably comment to this, they had used our park for an off-leash area a couple of times was it last summer or summer before? And it seemed to work out fine. I mean, there's no fence around that, and kind of everybody was getting along, and their dogs were getting along. So I think it'll probably work out fine. And I think the most of the parks, there's people just take their dogs and let them loose anyways. So
too often.
I mean, in Oregon City, there's just not a lot of dogs on leashes in parks.
Carol Pauley.
Yes, I share some concerns too, but I know we really need areas for dogs to run. So I think it's good to have the rules that 3 different sites that you've chosen. What I do like about them is the line of sight is pretty good. You can see, where the dogs are. The Barclay Park, there's a few trees there. That concerns me a little bit, just because if you have kids playing, you may not know there's a dog there. It's good to know to have that line of sight. And were you thinking about maybe using chalk lines to really show the boundary of exactly where it is, and then also to have the stations for the disposal bags right there and the postings right there, so it's very clear, because sometimes people will just get out of the car and they'll just let their dog run instead of waiting to get in the designated area, and I think that's where the conflict, and I've had the same experience at Marietta Park, because I don't know where at that park that dogs are allowed, but people seem to just take a license that they can just run their dogs anywhere, and they run on paths, and you'll be hiking on a path, and all of a sudden you'll come across a dog that's way ahead of his owner. So I think if the line of
chalk
sight
lines
is
is a good way to do it and very inexpensive. I think that would be a good approach to before we have a fenced area, and then we have to have good signage. Absolutely, that's part of our thinking, is make sure the signs are there, so at least there's no excuse for not obeying the rules.
I know it's a hot topic in our with all of our citizens.
So one, I guess, additional comment on Commissioner Pauley's question there is how we exactly designate the area, and again, not putting up the fences in these areas, because we want to do that eventually at a permanent site, or multiple sites. Quite frankly, we're just we're working through that, but yeah, that's kind of a question of how we would do that exactly, and we want to. Where we're at right now is checking in with the commission to see your comfort level to go forward with this program. If you give us the okay and you seem comfortable with that, then we would go out and determine exactly how we're going to do that and make sure that it's going to we're going to do the best we can to be successful. I think signage and education is going to be the key, and we'd probably have some way to denote this is the area. I don't know exactly what that's going to be, whether it be you're saying chalk lines and something like that, but we would certainly come up with some way to show folks. But again, I think the main thing is it's probably not going to be a perfect solution. It's intended to be an interim solution. Quite frankly, the Parks Committee was responding to a large amount of public input about, it looks like it's going to be a few years or whatever the time is before we have a permanent site. Can we do something? And this was the solution that was developed after a lot of study and a lot of thinking. So, yeah, there's definitely some challenges, but I think it's nice to offer that opportunity and give people the what a lot of people are doing right now is against the rules, and we'd like to help them do something that's not against the rules.
Yeah, I feel comfortable with, my comfort level is with chalk lines, so people know exactly where the boundaries are, and so that that's where my comfort level is.
Commissioner Smith.
I appreciate the work that's been done on this and the discussions. I was at both the Filbert Run and Glen Oak kind of visioning meetings, and that has been a huge discussion, at least in the Glen Oak Park one. I'm not a big dog fan, but I realize that I'm a minority in this town. And so it is definitely something that we need to address. I think one of the things that is added to that is the school district, as far as I know, in all of their school properties, at least at the high school, they're now not allowing dogs anywhere. And in a lot of those places, I think people were using to walk their dogs. And so I think, especially in the area of Glen Oak, that has really made a huge impact. where people are saying, oh, well, if we can't do it on the school property, where are we supposed to go? And so I think it is important to have some alternatives to deal with that. So I feel comfortable with a test run. I think checking in with the neighborhoods on a regular basis, I think is a great idea. And I'm surprised that some of the other people on this commission were not as supportive as I thought they might be, because they're all very much dog lovers.
You never know where we're going to fall.
I never know. But anyway, good work, and I think it'll be great when we have a park or at multiple parks that can actually have more facilities.
I think you guys are right to get, and I know I'm not supposed to be on the list. I'm supposed to be on the list, but I think you're right to get a lot of different locations. I do. I do think that's important.
Yeah. You're after me.
You're
You're
on.
after
Okay.
me.
I just
Just
keep
wanted to
cutting
make
you
sure.
off.
That's okay.
That's all right. All commissioners go first anyway. No, that's the way we do it. Actually, I wanted to comment on the Barclay Park. From the appearance, if you're looking down on it, it looks like that canopy at that area where the mark off is thick, and the canopy is, but those trees are all mostly
Yeah.
dug firs, and they're 100 feet tall. The actual spacing between the trees is very
Yeah.
broad.
Yeah,
I think the line of sight there is good. The area in the back is all aspen. It's very thick, and that's off the dog park. So I don't think Barclay is actually an issue in terms of line of sight.
Yeah, that aerial is a little bit deceiving.
Yeah.
It looks more covered from above
Yeah.
than it actually is underneath. Yeah.
Maybe for here.
Sometimes it's okay for me to go in the middle because I might have something to help the
Oh, no.
conversation move along. But I wanted to assure Commissioner Roth there's no ground clearance requirements, I don't think, under this. So dachshunds are going to be fine. Inside joke only. But I do want to mention that, Scott, how many citations, between you and Jim, I think we'll know the answer to this, how many citations have we written in any of our parks for leash violations in the last 5 years?
I can't tell you the number of citations. It does come up when there are complaints. We usually handle them by having people leash their dog, but we have cited people when the dogs go and bite people, which does happen.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure we're managing expectations with regard to enforcement, because it's helpful to know that we have at least done that in the cases where there's been incidents that we can document. But when we don't have enforcement of our current areas and we're creating more places where we also don't have enforcement, I mean, let's just be honest. We're relying on we don't have any pet problems. We only have owner problems.
Right.
That's right.
And we're relying on owners to comply with these rules, and to the extent they violate these rules, unless somebody is bitten and there's a retroactive application of these rules, we're not really going to have that much enforcement. So we're or any that I can see. So we just have to be sure we're comfortable with that risk. I'm assuming that these are areas that aren't heavily utilized by children.
Well, I think are. They can be.
Well, not concentrated uses. Are there playgrounds, like right by the
Not in Barclay.
play equipment? Yeah. So
What's that?
In Wesley Lynn, there is, but it's some distance away.
This is quite a
Yeah.
there's some physical
Yeah.
barriers. So for the most part, these are separated from those
Yeah.
types of
Yeah,
things,
that's
except
what I
for
thought.
Park Place is a little bit
That's not our park.
more condensed, but
And then, of course, we have some of the more rural parts of larger tracts of land that we bought in cooperation with Metro and other places where, in the future, that if one of these doesn't work out, we might have some more kind of open land
Sure,
areas where there would be less impacts depending on how this goes. So I'm glad we're doing it on a trial basis, and hopefully the neighborhoods will let us know how those
The
things are
people
going.
that actually own dogs that want to follow the rules are the ones that want this.
that's
So
correct.
I think it'll be very well received in our community.
And
Sorry, just a couple comments. When you guys are moving forward, if you could just constantly send an email to like the neighborhood associations to remind them of, this is happening in your neighborhood. I don't know how else to spread the word, but any way that you guys can think of just to remind people that this is what we're working on would be very grateful. I'd be grateful for that.
On that, just clarification, you're asking so that they could help us to monitor and that kind of thing?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Well, and just to make them all aware.
Sure.
You know, because I may not ever go to my neighborhood meeting, but maybe I'll get an email from my neighborhood chair that says this is what's going on. So any way that we can let our citizens know that this is what we're working on and to help us out and let us know if there's a problem or what they're seeing.
Absolutely.
I think two of the three proposed have park hosts at certain times of the year.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So that can be a help.
So
as
that
well.
would be a great help too. Yes.
I think one of
Absolutely.
the things that's a really big help is I noticed you have a new bag dispenser up here on the promenade. And just, I always carry my newspaper bags with me, but just seeing that there was a reminder of, what's supposed to be going on, and I think it would help people that maybe don't clean up after their animals and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, thanks for that comment. We, I don't, if you've noticed, or I think we've talked about it a little bit, but we've actually been, over the last probably 3 or 4 years, we've been slowly adding those to more and more of our parks. We've chosen the ones that are, have the most use, and we're kind of working down the list, but we keep adding more parks, and and then obviously these off leash areas, we would definitely be putting those in the prime
Yes.
line of sight where you're going to be entering and exiting, and making sure that people have that opportunity so they don't have an excuse to say I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
We're going to do everything we can to provide that opportunity. So
Now, if you can just get, how we've got the little rings downtown that you can tie your horses up to?
I don't know if there's many left.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
We've got them
Might be
downtown
one
in
left.
Portland, all over the place. They're a
They
great
kept-
thing to
they kept
trip on.
ones.
Street signs all the time to do that.
If you can get some dog tie-ups,
we'll look into that.
they could be smaller.
Well, thanks.
I think
Thanks
the,
very
I think
much.
the general direction, if I understand it
Yeah.
correctly, is to go ahead and proceed
Yeah.
with your efforts there. Keep us
Very
posted.
good. And we will do that. We'll communicate and let the commission and the neighborhoods and however we can get the word out with our
Yeah.
citizens through our trail news website, email blasts and press releases, and we'll be in communication and with the commission and with everybody in terms of evaluating the program ongoing. That's
Yeah.
the key here. Is we're not sure exactly how this is going to work, but we're going to give it a shot, and
Yeah.
we'll continue to monitor, and we'll report back and let you know how it's going.
Thank you.
And if you have any feedback that you either hear from your constituents or you personally have experience, we'd love to know about that too. So.
Human constituents or
What's that?
human constituents?
Yeah, yes,
Yeah, okay.
preferably. I don't know how good the communication would be from the canine constituents. Thank you very
Well,
much.
thank you very much, and
Appreciate
thank
it.
everybody on PRAC for
Yeah,
this. I
they-
mean,
For all your
that's
work.
been a long,
They really have done
hard
a lot
job
of
with them.
research and a lot of
yeah,
working through this, and so
been a lot of work. And I know I rely very heavily on our advisory committee, so I
they do a
really
great job.
appreciate all the work they do.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks.
With that, we're going to have a discussion from John Lewis regarding the adoption of the Lynn Avenue, Leland Road, Myers Road Corridor Plan.
Right. Well, thank you for carving some time out for this work session. Although at the last time we brought this topic before you, we set this date as a date that we would bring forth something. We weren't exactly sure. If you remember that particular
Yes.
meeting, we went through detailed update of how the corridor plan was coming together, and I think for the most part we had pretty widespread acceptance of the corridor plan, with the exception of the intersection of Lynn, Leland, Warner Parrott, Warner Milne, and Central Point. There
The
was
roundabout that I love.
the roundabout idea that many people are favorable of, but there's also it results in impacts to some of
Yes.
the property owners in that area. So we heard from the property owners that, or at least one and maybe two property owners and a tenant as well, and they submitted some information that we heard and have put a fair amount of consideration into. And so tonight we can talk a little bit about where we've been with this. It's been before the Planning Commission. Well, let me start with it. We've taken it out to the public, and we took it before the Transportation Advisory Committee, and we got a motion from them for approval, and then the Planning Commission also has looked at this plan and approved it as it stands. And then we brought before the City Commission. We had a first kind of meeting with the City Commission and work session, but it was that first public hearing where things kind of turned on us a little bit. And I think, in hindsight, I think that wasn't a bad thing. So, given that some of that feedback that we had, we spoke to Wallace Engineering. So David Brokaw from Wallace Engineering is here. Nate Schroeder from DKS and Associates is here to talk a little bit about kind of some of that feedback and talk about where we'd like to go with this. But to cut to the chase, on your agenda later is during a public hearing, we're actually going to ask you for a continuance so that we can bring on the experts to look hard at that intersection for solutions. And then also on the consent agenda is a contract amendment for Wallace, who's would use DKS as a subconsultant to do the work. So the corridor plan, typically we wouldn't go to this level of effort, but it's in a very, very important intersection.
It is.
We think the feedback that we've heard from the citizens has some of it has merit to it, and we'd like to have a plan that we've got as much buy-in as we can get. So we'd rather delay. So we're going to ask you for a continuance to the 15th of April, and that gives us plenty of time to do the traffic counts that we need to do and do the analysis that we need to do, that some of the things that David and Nate are going to talk about. So with that, turn it over to David and Nate, and we'll go from here.
Thanks, John. So John kind of caught you up on where the corridor plan is at the moment, and the first two issues on our discussion points here. So in the goals of this meeting is what he said is to get a continuance on the corridor plan and defer any adoptions until April 15th, and then an authorization for the design work. And like more than anything, just want to kind of give a discussion about what the design work it is we're doing. We're going to undertake an intersection control analysis. I'm going to have Nate talk a little bit about what an intersection control analysis is and what the goals of that process is. So.
Sure. Yeah, so an intersection control analysis, what we're really hoping to achieve from that is to look at different options. Mainly at this location would be roundabouts versus traffic signal or some variation of the traffic signal. And so we've identified a few of those, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. But with those options, we would then develop a list of criteria to compare them and figure out the pros and cons of each alternative. And then that way we can make a comparison as to what the preferred alternative would be based on things like traffic operations, is there queuing problems, is delay, right-of-way impacts, access, circulation impacts, construction cost is something that we'll think about, as well as ongoing maintenance cost. And then safety is a big one, because obviously each alternative has kind of huge swings in safety in different areas. So those would be things that we'll look at as part of the analysis, and then make a recommendation after we complete that as to what we think is the preferred alternative for this location.
Okay. And so we prepared a few just very basic exhibits of what the alternatives we're going to look at, and I'll just kind of run through those. In essence, the first option is just to do nothing and leave the intersection as is. We have two signalized options. We have one option to make no signal modifications but close the left turn out of Central Point. And then we have two roundabout options, a 4-leg and a 5-leg roundabout. And we'll kind of just show some schematics of those. So the first signalized option would close the left turn movement on Central Point, extend a median on Warner Parrott Road between Lynn Avenue and Central Point that would prevent vehicles from making that left turn. And then we'd incorporate some modifications to the intersection of Lynn, Warner Milne, Leland, and Warner Parrott to accommodate the design vehicle making a U-turn at that intersection, and then modify the signal timings to accommodate that as well. The second signalized option would be to expand the intersection, in essence, to incorporate Central Point Road. It would require some new signal poles and some looking at timing and queuing and that to make this operate as a single intersection. The third option would be a closure of Central Point entirely with no modifications to the signal and no modifications to allow U-turn movements at that intersection. And as part of their analysis, and I have a vicinity map, They're going to look at using some of the modeling that they did as part of the TSP, alternative routes that people might take, Shenandoah, Boynton, South End Road, to get to make that left movement or go to the destinations that they might make. There's not a lot of people making that left turn, but we want to see what the impacts would be on the system for people who want to make that left.
Hey, Dave, just to be clear on that last option, you said close Central Point Road in its entirety.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
The left
We saw the map.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, just close it for left turn movements coming out of Central Point. Yeah.
And I guess the emphasis on this left turn movement is that is our problem. That's one of our major problem movements, both in and out of Central Point Road. So.
And then we have a 4-leg roundabout option that we developed as part of the corridor plan, and then the 5-leg roundabout option as well. So, and we have we received a number of comments in the last commission meeting on this, and if you want to discuss the issues with that, a lot of the things that were brought out as part of those questions were issues that would be addressed as part of the design. In essence, the corridor plan is kind of a broad look at impacts and cost, and modeling to determine what this thing will do and the capacity it has, but not down to the level of a number of the comments. Not that the comments that they raised weren't valid. A number of them were things that we would like to look into and address as part of the design effort of a roundabout like this.
So, I mean, from our perspective, the original design didn't have this level of effort in it, or not the original design. The original contract with Wallace was, we need to incorporate the intersection, but the level we think maybe the community's asking us to take it to is much higher level, so that's why we're suggesting we do a contract amendment to include that extra design. And it's something we have budget for.
So we, in essence, want to make sure we're providing the right solution to this intersection, and that's what the intersection control analysis will get us to.
Well, this is the discussion at this point on the intersection itself? Okay. Time for comments? Okay, I have requests. Well, of course, one of the ideas that I had expressed was to have the right turns on that roundabout being only right turns, not straight throughs, and only have one through lane instead of what you propose there, and reduce the footprint. My wife asked a question, and I thought I'd pose it to you. I've never seen one like this, but she was thinking, and I think it was from the standpoint of going back to that picture we have there on the screen. To perhaps get some separation off of the Warner Parrott and Central Point piece, whether you could have an oval instead of a roundabout. That is one that actually everything looks really crowded there, and to actually perhaps have some additional space as you're coming off from Warner Milne and Central Point there.
We actually discussed an oval roundabout in the very beginning of this concept. Oval roundabouts have some particular problems. In essence, you're creating a straightaway and a turn. Roundabouts are good because they're round, and so there's not a lot of driver correction that needs to happen. And so you have a lot of safety issues with oval roundabouts that these don't have.
Well, I gave her a bad time about her suggestion, but I'll say that you considered it before she talked about it, so that's great. Anyway.
Verbally either. Oval about?
Oval about? Yeah. Anything that we could do to reduce that footprint, I think, will be welcomed by the property owners. And
part of the design effort will be going back and verifying. I mean, we're going to do traffic counts, and we'll have better numbers for pedestrians and vehicles moving throughout this intersection. And so maybe there's potential to drop some of these right turn bays, shrink them up, see what we can do to reduce the footprint.
The other thing I was going to make a comment on, when you look at Central Point, and I know you know this, but That's where a lot of the growth is occurring right now. So the traffic impact is going to be greater. I don't know to what degree more people are going to make those left turns. What I've been very impressed about, and that's simply people understand this intersection, is people do not block it. You rarely see somebody blocking those intersections, so there's the opportunity for cars to move far better. There's a tremendous courtesy shown at those intersections, which I haven't seen other parts of our region, but it was very, very clear there that people know what the problem is and are polite in letting people through from Central Point, for example, which is a bit of a challenge on the light changes. I don't see how that double set of signals will work when you have such a. If you go back to that, if you can, you flip back to that double signalization. That leg between, so you got a lot of traffic turning right on Central Point, and that leg between the two signals is very, very short.
To be honest, I don't know how that's going to work either.
No.
That's his job.
That's part of what
So-
we're going to look at as part of this analysis and evaluating this alternative is what would it take to make these two signals so closely
They'd have
together
to be programmed.
work?
They'd have to be programmed very carefully.
Right, and my guess is that because they are so close, they would operate almost as one intersection, and it would be, and that's going to be very challenging, but it's something that it's worth looking at.
Any other comments? We'll flip over here and see. Mr. Mumfirst.
Thank you for this. I do like roundabouts. I do. I would like to go back to the roundabout, though, picture. Okay, so I don't feel a business needs to suffer because we're going to put in the roundabout. I think it should go a little bit more into the Mount Pleasant property, in my opinion. And the green, wide green stuff in the middle, is that plants?
It's unknown at this point. There could be paved medians and turn lanes in there. That's
Or it
something
could not be that way. And it could just be straight roundabout, like, like in off of in Portland, 39th, Caesars. They have a really nice roundabout, and there's not a lot of plants in between the lanes to take up that space that could be used for cars.
Right. That particular roundabout that has some functional issues. Roundabout was actually designed in like 1906 or something.
But it's been great.
But it has worked.
It has
effective.
worked. It works very well. So it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to have a bunch of trees and stuff in the middle of the lanes, in my opinion.
No,
it could just
no,
be. It could
essence,
be just. That would make it. That would make it the lanes like shorter, not so wide. I guess is the word I'm looking for.
I'm not following.
You're talking about the splitter islands, the green areas on the approaches to the roundabout?
Yeah, do you see how wide it is?
Yeah, so a lot of those features are aimed at deflecting vehicles and aiming them where they're supposed to be, getting them lined up. The roundabout at Gleason and 39th is stop controlled. It's not really a modern roundabout, which is yield entry.
Right.
There's lots of intricacies to it, but with this, we're really trying to guide people. So we could potentially look at making that a little narrower, shortening up some of those.
Yes.
But I think a lot of that would fall into the items like we were talking about with some of the signing and striping issues that were brought up, that you would refine that as you're going through the design process and looking at your design vehicles, turn movements, how can we tweak these, where can we make these more, smaller or shorter to, save, impacts to right of way and, So it could be looked at, but I think at this point it's trying to be high level.
So the other thing I wanted to bring up is I do think that we all agreed that everything but the roundabout was okay with this plan. The corridor plan was good, I thought, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that what we decided?
That is true, but that's a big bad intersection.
But this is and it does need to be addressed, and I totally agree. Whether, I assume the police department and city will maybe have some impact in that area, I'm sure. And that's probably why we're talking about this roundabout today. So I think that it does not need to, what's the word I'm looking for? Encroach into the businesses that are already established.
And we want to minimize that. Unfortunately, because of the nature of roundabouts, every action has a reaction.
Well,
with
absolutely.
those. And we've heard concerns from the church property. Those property owners that would essentially gain land. That would then become land that they would have to manage. Every direction we move it. But I like the idea of efficient design.
Absolutely.
We've heard a couple of things, which is, from the community, which is, look, if you're going to put in a roundabout, you need to do it in a fashion that's going to move the truck traffic, because there's truck traffic in there. So don't make it too small. Make sure it's safely signed and striped and sizable lanes, such that it can move all modes of traffic that we need through there.
I agree.
And so, we don't want to scale back too much, but I mean, if some of the, just some of the entrance alignments for the lanes can be, keep in mind, this is like a 30,000 foot level concept. That's the name concept plan, right? Or corridor plan. This is, fairly just conceptual. And so
Well, I
the
understand
details that
that
go into kind of sidewalk width and those kind of things, we'll be able to answer some of those questions out of this. It's still not going to be a design, but it's going to get us a lot closer. If we can move that one way or another, if we can get a smaller radius, for instance, that'd be helpful. All those things could help. So we want to look at all that.
I think the mayor's correct. You're going to see more growth out Central Point Road, and it's going to be heavily used. So I would suggest not closing that. That would be kind of crazy.
Not closing.
The problem is that we have something in front of you that is not even half baked.
Mm-hmm.
So we have all these comments that that's going to have to be done. I think the most valuable consensus I see is that people, you folks, are bringing forward to us your various concerns that we're taking note of, and then I think what we have that's of value is, look, we recognize we need to study the intersection more.
Mm-hmm.
And virtually some version of a roundabout seems to be like a roundabout in one form or another, especially a low impact one, is probably going to be acceptable to this group, but there's going to be another group here.
No,
Really? And we're gonna have to work through that process too. And I just think that until we have more details on this intersection, I don't think we have really a professional consensus, much less anyone that the public could get around.
I would hope so.
And
But
that's what needs to be done next.
But when you bring this up and the public sees this is what the
Exactly.
public
I
has
know.
in their mind that's going to happen.
That's right.
And so that's why I'm
That's why
saying,
everybody wants to-
I like roundabouts, don't get me wrong, I do. But what I'm saying is when you put that up there and say this is what, we're looking at, I mean, that's what the citizens see.
We
And
see
that's what we
concept
hear
and they
about.
see reality. Yeah.
So, I mean, they don't see that it's just a concept plan, that it's at 30 feet or whatever, I don't know. They don't see that it's not going to happen tomorrow. They don't see that.
Right.
Mr. Polly.
Thanks, John, for digging deeper into this. And I know it's a concept plan, and I think it's good to have other concepts in the concept plan, other choices of this intersection, because this intersection does impact a lot of people and different businesses, and there is growth that will occur there. So thank you for just digging deeper, and I think it's good to really study that intersection and look at other alternatives. That is a very important intersection, and it'll even be more important with the police station
Yes.
there, and we have businesses there, and growth will occur on those areas too. So I think it's a step in the right direction, and even though it's just a concept plan, I think it's good to look deeper at that intersection now. Do you feel that the study will still be relevant? Because, of course, this is going to occur in stages, so this may be years down the road before this intersection is addressed. Do you think the study will still be relevant then, like 5 years, 10 years?
Well, yeah, the study is going to project traffic growth through 2035.
Okay, good.
So we'll be looking at future growth.
Well, not only 2035, but our full build-out projection. So, I mean, that's the intent. We
All
wouldn't
right.
want to build a roundabout at this location that would not handle that and then some, really.
Right.
I wanted to come back to Commissioner Rum's discussion about the medians. I think the green color implies it's a landscaping thing.
Yes.
I don't think it is. I think pedestrian crossing at this roundabout is extremely challenging. I think you need a refuge in the middle because people are going to have to concentrate on cars turning right, cars coming straight on, and going both directions. And I think it's critical that you have a pedestrian refuge there.
Sure.
I don't think
Sure.
the intent was to be a landscape feature. I think it was built
I
for
think
safety.
that was brought up last time,
Yeah.
was that it was going to be a land, you're going to put green stuff in there.
We're going to change that color at some point.
That'd be good.
It does imply, you know, flowers
I'm
and.
telling you, if you
Yellow.
see it here, people think that's the way it is.
And of course, the closure of the left lanes were only associated with the signalized alternatives. They are not. Of course, you've got a roundabout. People are going to be able to turn left on it.
Yeah.
So I have a hard time seeing anything but a roundabout there personally.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And I'm a very frequent user of that intersection now. Anything else for the good of the order? We're going to talk about other aspects of the corridor plan, or was it just
Well, we can, but you know, I think what we have for the remainder is been pretty well vetted and seems to have widespread acceptance. So I didn't plan for that. I've got it here though, if you want to.
I went and looked at something, and as I drove it, I thought about something. I really like that feature out of Singer Creek Park, where you have that one bike pedestrian lane going off and connecting to, must be,
Electric?
no,
No.
The park, you mean,
The park.
or up?
going through the
Sharman?
park and hitting, and not hitting, hitting, it must be
Pearl.
Pearl, right. And then I drove on Pearl, and it looks like it would hit at a point where the slope starts going up like that to get there. So is there any long-term vision of extending that kind of pathway on down along the right-of-way that extends further down rather than ending at Pearl? Because from a bike standpoint, I think you're going a very challenging route. They go downhill and hit that, and then they're going to have to go up a very steep grade to get to Molalla.
So I looked into that. I don't have those maps here, but
Yeah, that's okay.
what I found was there wasn't space down along the creek to run a path to the north side of Pearl, but there's an apartment complex that actually has a gated or a gap in the fence at the back of the property that has a small path that winds up and connects to the north. And my thought was, and my recommendation was to try and get an easement so that people could use that space and get through there, and then pave out the path from the backside of the fence to connect across, so you wouldn't have to go up that hill.
Oh, okay. All right. That was my question. Good.
Thank you guys very much.
Yes, that's great. And that leaves the city manager's report.
I just have one item, and I have that for the council meeting,
Okay,
the commission meeting, rather.
very good. Everybody's welcome to hang around for an hour and wait for the commission meeting coming up at 7 o'clock.